Thank you, Emmy. Our next speaker is a big wig in the Bay Area right now, Timothy Burrows. Understanding SB 54, California's new law to prevent pollution from packaging and plastic foodware. Timothy is Executive Director of Stop Waste, also known as the Alameda County Waste Management Authority. Stop Waste is a government agency that works with local jurisdictions, schools, nonprofits, and businesses to advance sustainability in Alameda County. Timothy has 18 years of experience working within public, community serving agencies, including serving as director of the Department of Planning and Development at the City of Berkeley and overseeing Berkeley's climate action programs. Welcome, Timothy.
Thank you, Freddie. Good morning, everybody. I put that part about bigwig in my own introduction, just so you know. Let's see if I can get this guy to work. Okay, great. So I'm here today mainly to help motivate all of us to play a role in participating in the SB 54 implementation process. And really, I want all of us to help make sure that this law really meets the potential that it has to accelerate progress to a more equitable and a more circular economy. SB 54 is known as the Plastic Pollution Prevention and Packaging Producer Responsibility Act, which takes a full breath to get out. It passed in 2022, and the rulemaking is underway now. And in fact, just Friday, just a couple of days ago, the formal 45-day public comment period opened by CalRecycle. So the process for defining how SB 54 will be implemented is underway now, and it's time to engage. Okay. SB 54 is arguably the nation's most comprehensive law to reduce the volume of single-use packaging and plastic single-use foodware entering our communities, and also increase the recycling and composting of single-use packaging. So it's going to turn down the tap on the amount of these single-use materials that are entering our communities, and it also has the potential to lead to more clarity and more consistency for consumers regarding what materials are actually recyclable and what materials are actually compostable. It also has the potential to stimulate investment in reuse and refill infrastructure and really drive innovation in packaging design that's good for people and also good for the planet. And fundamental to this law is it shifts the burden of the costs needed to collect and process recyclable and compostable materials. It shifts that burden from local jurisdictions and from ratepayers to the producers of the packaging materials. Another key, yes, that's really fundamental. Thank you. So another key and critical feature of this law, which also I think deserves some applause, is that it creates $5 million mitigation fund. And that $5 billion, the purpose of that is to clean up a lot of the plastic pollution that already exists in our communities, especially in underserved, disadvantaged communities. So $5 billion paid for by the packaging producers into a mitigation fund that will clean up that plastic pollution over time. Come on, baby. Maybe I'll just ask someone out there to advance it. Okay, perfect. So the law focuses on single-use packaging and plastic single-use foodware, and these materials constitute about 25% of our state's waste stream. And the amount of these materials, particularly the plastic of these materials that actually gets recycled, is quite low. Only about 5% of post-consumer plastic waste is recycled, according to CalRecycle. Next slide. Okay, thank you. Here are the main goals of the law. All single-use packaging and plastic single-use foodware must be recyclable or compostable by the year 2032. And further, all single-use plastic packaging materials and foodware must achieve a specific recycling rate, 65% by 2032. And finally, and what makes this law different and more comprehensive is that the actual volume of these materials entering our communities must decrease by 25% by weight and by unit by the year 2032. There are also specific requirements for expanded polystyrene food serviceware. It may not be sold, distributed, or imported in the state unless the rates you see here on this slide are achieved. And the current recycling rates for expanded polystyrene are estimated to be currently in the low single digits. I mentioned that producers must pay for the law's implementation. The law requires that producers of the packaging material that are covered by this law form what's called a producer responsibility organization, or a PRO. And there's a nonprofit called Circular Action Alliance that applied to serve as the PRO and was selected by CalRecycle to play that role. And they have a really big job. I asked one of the leads the other day if he has time to sleep or eat at this point for the amount of work that he has to do in the coming months and years. They have to enroll thousands of producers into the PRO. They have to collect information from producers that gets a sense of, to help them get a sense of what types of materials are being produced and what volume of materials are being produced. And they also have to collect the fees from producers that ultimately fund implementation of SB 54. The law also creates a 16-member advisory board to advise CalRecycle and the PRO on the law's implementation. I'm honored to serve as the board's first chair. And we're diving into that work so that we can add value to that process, including helping to ensure that the law leads to not only environmental benefits, but also social equity benefits and economic benefits as well. I mentioned that SB 54 requires that all plastic packaging and foodware must be recyclable or compostable by the year 2032. So I'm going to say a little bit more about how the law defines recyclability and compostability, and I'll start with recyclability. So SB 54 points to the Truth in Labeling Law, SB 343, which was passed in 2021 to define recycling. And under that law, in order for the state to deem a material as recyclable, it must meet two specific criteria. One is that at least 60% of the state's population must have access to a program that deems a given material recyclable. And the second criteria is that the material must be sorted into a defined recycling stream by a transfer or a processing facility that collectively serves at least 60% of the state. So materials that don't meet these recyclability thresholds can no longer be labeled as recyclable by next year, July 2025. And then by 2032, if a material is not recyclable, it can no longer be sold or distributed in the state of California. And for the definition of compostability, SB 54 points to some previous laws as well, AB 1200 and 1201. And essentially, for any material to be deemed to be labeled as compostable, it must meet ASTM standards for compostability. It must be free of those nasty forever chemicals, PFAS. It must be distinguishable from non-compostable products. And starting in 2026, for a material to be deemed compostable, a material or product must be accepted in feedstocks that produce compost for organic agriculture, which is not the case for compostable plastics right now. So SB 54 takes these criteria and it applies them to packaging specifically. And the draft regulations go a step further for packaging or foodware to be considered compostable. It must be accepted by 50% of the state's organic collection programs by 2026, actually by now, as of now, and 75% by 2026. So what does all this mean? Our interpretation is that it's likely that by 2026, compostable plastics, at least as we know them today, will no longer be labeled as compostable. And by 2032, these materials will no longer be able to be sold or distributed in the state of California. So in December, CalRecycle published its initial list of packaging materials that are currently considered recyclable or compostable, based on those criteria that I just mentioned, that point to 343 and AB 1201. And essentially, it's glass and aluminum containers, paper and cardboard, and rigid plastics 1, 2, and 5 that are currently considered recyclable. Plastic utensils and film plastic did not make the recyclability or compostability list. Poly-coated food serviceware, Aseptic cartons, gable top milk cartons, these aren't on the list of recyclability and compostability. One of the bigger surprises is that tin cans, bimetal cans, are not deemed recyclable. That gets back to that recyclability criteria that I mentioned. According to CalRecycle data, only 24% of the state's population collects tin cans for recycling, and only 33% of MRFs recover them into a separate stream. So that's the criteria associated with those materials not meeting the recyclability threshold. Compostable plastics are also not considered compostable. So this list has big implications for local governments because local governments have to collect the materials that are on this list. SB 54 also adds a layer of accountability by defining responsible end markets. So all covered materials have to be sent to responsible end markets, which have to have transparency and accountability about how the material is recycled and how the material is handled. One important next step that CalRecycle is setting in motion right now is the needs assessment. The needs assessment essentially charts a path between the system that we have now and the system that we need to implement to achieve the goals of SB 54. So I'm excited about the law's potential. I can tell that many of you are excited about it as well. There's a few questions that we're tracking as I wrap up here. Fundamental to the law is that producers reimburse local jurisdictions and haulers for the costs associated with collecting and processing covered materials. So how this reimbursement process will work, what costs will be covered, what new investments will be needed to implement SB 54, how will ratepayers be affected? These are all open questions in the context of SB 54, and we can't be passive in how these questions are answered. We have to engage in this process and inform how these questions are answered from the perspective of local jurisdictions, community-based organizations, and producers. So now is the time to engage. This slide was accurate until a few days ago. The actual SB 54 comment period, 45-day comment period, is open now as of Friday. So now is the time to engage. Participate in the CalRecycle meetings, participate in the SB 54 advisory board meetings, bring your friends, and make sure that you get to inform this process. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Timothy. We have 5 minutes for questions. I assume there's going to be lots of questions, so I'm going to help Timothy field them. Back there, lady in the burgundy.
Hi, you said compostable plastic's not going to be accepted in the future, and I'm wondering about the ASTM D6400 rated compostable plastic bags. We're really promoting the use of those. And they are accepted at the facility that they go to, and it produces organic compost that is used on farms.
So a couple of things in response to your question. One is that bags are regulated by a different set of regulations outside of SB 54. And so bags are mainly regulated by 270, SB 270, and other laws at the state level. That being said, there was some research done by CalRecycle in the context of packaging in terms of how many compost facilities in the state accept compostable plastics right now. And I believe that if I get the numbers correct, there's about 27 composting facilities throughout the state that responded to a CalRecycle survey to get a sense of how many facilities are accepting compostable plastics right now. And 1 out of the 27 responded that they're currently accepting these materials. So the rate at which compost facilities are accepting these materials for composting is really informing whether these materials will be acceptable for the compost streams moving forward. And as of right now, the vast majority of composting facilities are not accepting these materials. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, do you have any concerns about like unintended consequences, like with the plastic bag bans and making thicker plastic bags that are reusable? Do you have any concerns with this law in that vein?
I think it speaks to the complexity of policymaking. I think policymaking is not a black and white process. And so we're trying to sort of achieve the highest value that we can possibly can with the policies that we make. With the initial version of the bag ban, there was an unintended consequence, right? Which we just switched to a different type of bag with thicker plastics. And so now there's legislation being introduced at the state level to try and address that issue. And so and that's exciting. And so what I think the important thing for us to keep in mind, and what I tried to emphasize in the context of SB 54, is that unintended consequences are always a risk. The degree to which unintended consequences will happen or not is largely informed by how we engage in the process. And so SB 54, the success of SB 54 depends on all of us informing and playing a role to make sure that law is implemented in a way that achieves the equity goals, the economic goals, and the environmental goals that it has the potential to achieve. If we don't engage, it's not going to meet its potential. We have to engage. Thanks for that question.
Can I ask mine? Yes, this is from Nicole. Can Timothy please talk about the reuse percentages required in SB 54?
Yes. Wow, you're going to make me recite numbers. Michelle, how was it, 5%? Okay.
Which slide?
I don't know how to go back with this thing, but I think it's,
Which one?
let's see. Oh, here we go. Yes. So what makes SB 54 unique is this 25% source reduction target, right? And that really is at the heart of circularity, is you reduce the volume of materials that are entering our community, and then the materials that still exist, you want to increase circularity, right? So that we minimize the amount of materials that go to landfill at the end of life. And so that's what makes SB 54 unique, and it has interim source reduction targets of 10% and 20%. 2% of the initial target has to be achieved by reuse and refill, and 4% by the 20% interim target by reuse and refill. And so when I said that the law has the potential to stimulate investment in reuse and refill in our communities, that's what I mean. There's dates and rates specifically baked into the law that are going to stimulate new investment, new innovation. Like the best types of regulations and requirements are one that bring out the best in the regulated community. And this law has the potential to really stimulate investment in, making it a different experience when we go to the grocery store and when we go to the cafe, and really making it more of the norm. Events like this should be the norm, right? I loved when I got the invite to this event and it said, make sure you bring your own napkin, make sure you bring your own cup, right? That's a beautiful thing. That shouldn't be unique. And SB 54 has the potential to accelerate something like that becoming the norm in the communities that we live in and the communities that we serve. So I'm excited about those targets. You done? Thank you for all the questions, and I'll be around for the rest of the day and happy to chat more. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. That's a really big law, and you deciphered it pretty well in 10 minutes.